The morning of my wedding, my phone buzzed with a message from Lona. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight I could feel immediately. Don't let them ruin your day. I stared at the screen, my heart sinking and twisting at the same time. I knew what she meant. My parents had already RSVP'd not attending. They didn't want to see me shine. They didn't want my wedding to be even a little brighter than Lona's engagement party. I held the invitation in my hands, feeling its weight like it carried every judgment and expectation they had ever placed on me. All my life, I had lived in the shadows of their favorites, my sisters, always careful not to appear too proud, too ambitious, too visible. But today was different. Today, I couldn't shrink anymore. This wedding wasn't just about exchanging vows or celebrating love. It was about finally taking up space, claiming my joy, and showing them that I could celebrate myself without apology. I took a deep breath, imagining their disapproval and the cold silence that would greet me in the hall. It stung, but I let it fuel me instead of break me. I thought about every long night of planning, every tiny detail I had poured my heart into, every choice I had made that reflected who I truly was. The dress, the flowers, the music, they were all pieces of me, not pieces to compare with anyone else. I folded the invitation carefully, putting it back in its envelope, and whispered to myself that I didn't need their approval to be happy. My heart still ached for their presence, but it also felt lighter, braver. Today, I would walk into that hall and celebrate not just my marriage, but my life, my choices, and the courage it had taken to stand tall while everyone I loved seemed to turn away. Today was mine, fully and unapologetically, and I refused to let anyone dim that light. The text from Lona stayed in my mind like a shield, a reminder that love could come from unexpected places, and that some blessings were meant to be claimed, not asked for. As I got ready, I felt a strange mix of sadness and excitement, knowing that when the doors opened, nothing would be the same again. This was more than a wedding. It was my declaration that I would never live in the shadow of anyone else again. From the moment I could remember, my sisters had always been the stars of our family. Everyone talked about their perfect grades, their flawless looks, the way they seemed to float through life without effort. Lona, my younger sister, was always the darling, so elegant, so modest, so perfect. At family events, I often felt like I was standing in the background of a painting where all the colors were brighter on them and faded on me. My achievements were noted politely, but never celebrated the way theirs were. My parents would whisper to me, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with a frown, that my choices should never compete with my sisters. I remember hiding my dreams, lowering my voice, making myself small in a house that demanded perfection from everyone else but me. For years, I tried to be invisible so that I wouldn't upset the balance they seemed to worship. It was exhausting, but it felt safer than standing out. But as my wedding day approached, something inside me shifted. I was tired of shrinking. I was tired of making myself small so others could feel bigger. This wedding was going to be different. For the first time, I would dare to shine without apology. I wanted my celebration to reflect who I truly was, not a diluted version meant to stay in the shadows of Lona or anyone else. Every detail, the flowers, the music, the hall, the dress, would be a piece of me, my personality, my style, my joy. I wanted my wedding to be full and bright, not because I wanted to compete with them, but because I deserved to step into my own light. I thought about all the years I had dimmed myself to fit their idea of modesty and perfection. I remembered every birthday when my sisters received all the praise, every school award where I was politely congratulated, every outfit my mother frowned at because it was too much. That pattern ended now. My wedding wasn't just a party, it was my statement. It was me saying, finally, that I mattered, that my happiness mattered, and that I would no longer live in the shadows of anyone else's life. I smiled to myself, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. This was my moment, and for the first time, I could see it clearly. I would walk into that hall not as a shadow, but as someone who had finally claimed her space. I was ready to shine. The moment I stepped into the bridal boutique, my eyes locked on a gown that seemed to call my name. It was unlike anything I had ever imagined for myself, dazzling, with delicate gold embroidery that caught the light like tiny stars, and a flowing train that trailed behind me like a river of silk. The second I tried it on, I felt something I hadn't felt before, pure confidence. I could see myself walking down the aisle, owning every step, shining exactly as I had always dreamed. But I also knew this dress would not please everyone. The final fitting came, and my mother arrived, her eyes scanning every inch of the gown. I held my breath, waiting for a compliment, for even a hint of pride. Instead, her lips pressed into a thin line, and she shook her head ever so slightly. "It's too much. Maybe tone it down for the family," she said, her voice quiet but firm. I felt a rush of heat rise to my face. My fists clenched at my sides, but deep down, a quiet fire lit within me. I whispered to myself over and over, "No, this is my day. My choice, not theirs." I knew that if I let her words sway me, I would be shrinking again, letting someone else's fear or judgment dictate my happiness. That thought made me even more determined. The designer, sensing my resolve, smiled and shook her head. She adjusted nothing, leaving the gown exactly as it was, glittering, radiant, and impossible to ignore. When I twirled in front of the mirror, the gold threads caught the light of the chandelier, sparkling like tiny flames, and I felt unstoppable. For the first time, I wasn't trying to blend in or follow someone else's rules. I was being seen fully, in a way that demanded attention, but also celebrated who I truly was. I imagined walking down the aisle in that gown, every eye on me, not because I wanted to compete, but because I finally deserved to be celebrated. Every stitch, every shimmer, every fold of the train was a piece of my courage and a silent rebellion against years of feeling invisible. The gown wasn't just a dress. It was my armor, my declaration, my first real act of bravery. As I left the boutique, I held my head high. I knew my parents might frown, others might whisper, but I also knew something far more important. When I walked into that hall, I would shine unapologetically, and no one could take that away from me. The day had finally arrived. The hall was alive with music, laughter, and the soft glow of chandeliers reflecting off crystal decorations. Guests filled the seats, their chatter mixing with the hum of excitement. I stood behind the curtains for a moment, taking a deep breath, feeling my heart race. Then the music shifted, the signal I had been waiting for. As I stepped forward, the room seemed to pause. Every head turned, every eye followed, and a gentle gasp spread through the crowd. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but it wasn't fear, it was pure exhilaration. I walked down the aisle slowly, each step steady, holding my husband's hand, feeling the warmth and support of the love we shared. For the first time in my life, I felt fully visible, fully celebrated, and fully myself. Whispers floated around me, some admiring, some making comparisons to Lona, but I didn't let them touch me. Their words had no power here. Today this space belonged to me, to our love, and to the courage it had taken to get here. The cameras clicked, capturing every smile, every sparkle of my gown, every beat of my heart. I saw faces of friends and family, some beaming, some surprised, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the feeling in my chest, the first real moment of joy in years where I wasn't a shadow, where I wasn't measured against anyone else, where I wasn't trying to shrink to make someone else comfortable. As we reached the altar, I glanced briefly toward the empty seats where my parents should have been. A pang of sadness hit me, but it was mixed with pride. I realized then that this wedding was more than just exchanging vows or a celebration of love. It was a statement, a silent rebellion against years of favoritism and whispered expectations. Every step I had taken, every choice I had made to shine, every moment I had fought to be seen, it all led to this. I squeezed my husband's hand, feeling a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I knew that this day wasn't just about us. It was about me stepping into my own life without apology, about finally allowing myself to be celebrated fully. The ceremony continued, but in that moment, walking down the aisle, I understood something powerful. This wedding was not just a party or a tradition. It was my declaration that I would no longer live in someone else's shadow, and for the first time, I was truly free to shine. As we stood at the altar, exchanging vows, my eyes couldn't help but wander toward where my parents should have been. I wanted to see their faces, to catch even a flicker of pride or happiness, but all I found were empty seats. The absence hit me harder than I expected, a sharp, bitter sting, like salt against a wound. There were no familiar smiles, no tears, no whispered words of love, just space where they should have been, a silent reminder of their choice to stay away. Instead, my gaze landed on Lona. She sat in the front row, perfectly composed, radiant in her dress, and yet there was something in her expression, a quiet, smug satisfaction that made my chest tighten. All my life, I had felt her shadow stretch over me, but now she seemed to revel in the very act of my parents' absence. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I had imagined so many scenarios for this day, but never this. Never the empty space where love and support should have been. For a moment, I felt my knees weaken, my chest heavy with disappointment. I wanted to let the pain show, to let it ruin the joy I had worked so hard to claim. But then I remembered every choice I had made leading up to this day. The dress I refused to tone down. The celebration I had designed to reflect me, not anyone else. The courage it took to stand tall while everyone I loved seemed to turn away. I took a deep breath and lifted my chin. A small smile found its way onto my lips, quiet but firm. This was my moment. I may not have their approval today, but that did not take away the pride I had earned. My happiness, my joy, and my dignity were mine, and no absence could steal that. I squeezed my husband's hand, feeling the warmth and support that truly mattered. In that instant, I realized something powerful. Their choice to skip my wedding didn't define my worth. I let my eyes sweep across the guests who had come to celebrate with us. The friends, the mentors, the family who mattered. Their love filled the empty spaces, replacing what was missing with warmth and affirmation. As I repeated my vows, I carried a quiet, unshakable truth in my heart. I may have stood before empty seats, but I was full of pride, courage, and dignity. And that was worth more than anyone's fleeting approval. Halfway through the reception, just as I was trying to push aside the sting of my parents' absence, a familiar face appeared at the entrance. It was Aunt Zena, my childhood mentor, the woman who had always believed in me even when no one else did. My heart leapt at the sight of her, and a warmth spread through me that I hadn't felt all day. She had been there. For every small victory, every failure, every moment when I doubted myself. Seeing her now, standing among the guests with that proud, gentle smile, felt like a blessing I didn't even know I needed. She made her way toward me, navigating through the crowd, and when she reached me, she leaned close and whispered words that settled over my heart like a shield. Your parents may not see your worth yet, Sephew, but the world will. Her voice was soft, but it carried a weight that cut through the pain of disappointment and the anxiety that had been building all day. I felt my shoulders relax, my chest open, and a quiet courage rise within me. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't fully realized before. I had spent so much of my life craving approval from my parents, seeking validation from the people whose judgments had shaped me for years. But now, standing in that hall full of love, light, and support, I saw clearly that external validation was not what mattered. What mattered was owning my story, claiming my joy, and celebrating my love without apology. Aunt Zena's words reminded me that true acknowledgement comes from living fully and boldly, not from bending to the expectations of those who can't see your worth. I looked around the room. The friends who had cheered for me, the family who had chosen to support me, even strangers who had smiled at my joy, and I felt a sense of completeness I had never felt before. Their presence, combined with Aunt Zena's encouragement, washed away the emptiness left by my parents. For the first time, I realized that love and recognition didn't have to come from those who were blind to it. They could come from anywhere, as long as I stayed true to myself. I squeezed my husband's hand, a small smile spreading across my face. Today was more than a wedding. It was a celebration of courage, of dreams followed, of a story claimed. And with Aunt Zena's reassuring presence, I knew in my heart that I had everything I needed to shine. Fully, unapologetically, and without fear. Later that evening, just as the reception was in full swing and guests were laughing and dancing, I noticed movement at the entrance. My parents had arrived. My heart skipped a beat, but the feeling was not excitement. It was tension. From the way they walked in, shoulders stiff, eyes scanning the hall with judgment, I knew immediately that this visit was not about joining in our joy. They came to criticize, to point out what they thought was wrong, to remind me of the rules I had supposedly broken. My mother's gaze landed on the decorations, the music, the grand hall we had spent months planning. Her lips tightened, and she hissed just loud enough for me to hear. It's too extravagant. My father shook his head slowly, muttering under his breath, "Why can't you just be like Lona?" The words cut through me at first, a sting I hadn't expected to feel again after everything I had endured. For a brief moment, I wanted to shrink, to apologize, to make myself small and quiet like I had done for years. But something inside me held firm. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my chest with courage. I looked at my husband, at our friends, at the people who had come to celebrate with us, and I realized this was my moment. This was not the time to hide. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and let the words I had rehearsed in my mind for months flow naturally, clearly, and without fear. I am not Lona, I said, my voice calm but strong. This is my life, my happiness, my wedding. And it will never be less than anyone else's, because it is mine. The hall went quiet. Even the music seemed to pause. My parents' faces reflected shock, disbelief, maybe even guilt. But most importantly, the truth of my words hit harder than any argument could have. For years, they had tried to compare me, to keep me behind, to dictate how I should live and celebrate. But now, standing tall in my own wedding, I was finally untouchable by their disapproval. My words echoed through the hall, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of my independence and courage. Guests whispered among themselves, nodding, some smiling in support. Lona's confident expression faltered slightly, the smugness replaced with an unspoken acknowledgement that I had finally taken my place. I felt a rush of relief and pride, knowing that this confrontation was not about winning an argument. It was about reclaiming my life, my choices, and my voice. That night, I realized that saying what I felt was the most powerful act of love and bravery I could give myself, and nothing my parents said could take that away. After I spoke my truth, a wave of silence hung in the hall for a moment, heavy and charged. Then slowly, the guests began to clap. Not the polite, half-hearted claps meant to fill space, but genuine, warm applause. I looked around and saw smiles, nods, and eyes shining with admiration. People who had come to celebrate love were now celebrating courage. The tension that my parents had brought into the room began to dissolve, replaced by an energy that was alive, supportive, and free. Even Lona's confident, smug smile wavered. I caught the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, and in that instant, I realized that all the comparisons, the whispers, the constant shadow she had cast over me, it no longer held power. For the first time, I felt untethered from their judgments. My happiness, my joy, and my sense of worth were no longer dependent on anyone else's approval. That realization hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. I felt a quiet, steady pride grow in my chest. Every moment of doubt I had endured, every whispered warning that I should not compete, every time I had tried to shrink to make others comfortable, all of it had led me here. By refusing to dim myself for comparison, by choosing to embrace my full self, I had finally carved a space where I truly belonged. This was not just my wedding, it was my declaration that I could live fully, unapologetically, and with courage. I looked around at the faces of those who had cheered for me, supported me, and witnessed this bold step, and I felt an unshakable strength. Their love and recognition didn't replace my parents' absence, but they reminded me that validation comes in many forms, and sometimes, it comes from those who see you clearly and celebrate your truth. In that moment, I understood that the real victory was not in making my parents see me differently, or in earning Lona's approval, but in standing fully in my own light. I felt my shoulders relax, my heart expand, and a freedom I had never known settle over me. This turning point was not just about the wedding, not just about a single day. It was about a lifetime of courage, self-respect, and choosing to shine even when the people you expect to support you fail to do so. I squeezed my husband's hand, and a quiet smile spread across my face. I belonged here, fully, unapologetically, and nothing, no absence, no criticism, no comparison, could take that away. For the first time, I understood the power of claiming my space and my happiness, and it felt beautiful beyond words. As the evening unfolded, the hall transformed into a world of magic and light. The music swelled, and laughter filled every corner. Candles flickered softly, and the chandeliers scattered glimmers across the floor. Guests moved gracefully, celebrating with us, but more than that, they were witnessing something rare, an expression of joy that was wholly authentic, wholly mine. Family, friends, even strangers who had come to share the day, paused often to admire the elegance, the warmth, the way every detail reflected my personality. It was as if the entire space had become a mirror of my courage, my dreams, and my refusal to dim myself. I danced, spinning freely in my gown, feeling the silky train float around me. Every step was a release, a letting go of the years of hiding and shrinking. I laughed, the sound pure and unrestrained, carrying with it a sense of liberation I had never felt before. For so long, I had measured myself against others, tried to fit into spaces that were too small for me, tried to live according to expectations that were not mine. Tonight, none of that mattered. I belonged to myself fully, unapologetically. As I twirled on the dance floor, I caught glimpses of whispers among some guests. I could tell that envy and surprise lingered in some corners, but instead of dimming my spirit, it fueled it. Those whispers became part of the soundtrack to my triumph, proof that I had stepped into the light without fear, proof that I was seen exactly as I deserved to be. It was a validation of everything I had fought for, the courage to celebrate myself, the determination to refuse comparison, the bravery to claim my joy. I looked around at the smiles, the clinking glasses, the people who had cheered for me and supported me, and I felt a fullness in my heart I had never known. I realized that this celebration was more than a wedding party. It was a celebration of self, of the journey I had taken to arrive here, of the strength it had taken to say, I am enough. My happiness matters. My life is mine. I leaned into the music, into the laughter, into the warmth of everyone around me, and thought to myself, this is my moment. Not theirs, not Lona's. Mine. Every step, every twirl, every smile was proof that I had finally stepped out of the shadows, and nothing could ever pull me back. Tonight, I was free, and freedom had never felt so beautiful. Weeks after the wedding, a small envelope arrived at my door. I recognized my parents' handwriting immediately, and felt a flicker of curiosity mixed with caution. Inside was a brief, awkward note that simply read, "We are sorry for missing your wedding." I held it in my hands for a moment, feeling the weight of years of absence, judgment, and expectation condensed into those few words. A smile spread across my face, quiet but steady, as I set the note down and sipped my coffee. It wasn't the apology I had longed for, nor did it erase the pain of their absence, but it didn't matter. In that moment, I realized how far I had come. The wedding had been more than flowers, music, and dancing. It had been a lesson in courage, in choosing my own happiness, and in understanding that self-worth is never measured by someone else's approval. No ceremony, no applause, no note from anyone could give me that lesson. It was something I had earned by standing tall, by refusing to dim myself for comparison, by embracing my joy fully and unapologetically. I thought back to every step of that day, walking down the aisle in my dazzling gown, feeling every eye on me yet anchored in my own strength, the empty seats that had once threatened to break me but instead reminded me of my independence, the supportive words of Aunt Zena, reminding me that validation can come from unexpected places, and the confrontation with my parents, when I finally voiced the truth I had carried silently for years. Each memory felt like a thread in a tapestry I had woven for myself, a tapestry of courage, love, and authenticity. The wedding wasn't just a party. It was a declaration, a turning point, a marker in my life that said, loud and clear, that I belonged in my own light. I had claimed my space, my voice, and my life. Nothing could dim the brilliance I had discovered in myself. I tucked the note away, not out of spite, but with a calm acknowledgement that my happiness and worth were mine to define. Sitting there with my coffee, I smiled again, feeling a quiet pride that no one could take away. I had stepped into my power, fully and unapologetically, and the world would have to see me shine on my terms. Sephu had finally claimed her life, and nothing, not judgment, not absence, not envy, could ever change that. This was my lesson, my freedom, and my lasting truth.